There's this corroded bronze lump found in a shipwreck. It's the most advanced set of gears in the world. The Antikythera mechanism, a clockwork computer. 2,000 years old, and it means we have to rewrite the history of science. The ancient world, we think of marble statues, philosophy, simple tools. But this machine predicted eclipses, pinpoint accuracy. So how did they build it? And why was it lost for over 1,000 years? And what does advanced even mean? It was the spring of 1900. A crew of Greek sponge divers was sailing home from North Africa when they got caught in a bad storm. They steered toward the island of Antikythera for shelter. After the storm passed, the captain figured they should check the local waters. A routine decision. One of the divers, Elias Stadiotis, went down, and what he saw wasn't sponges. It was shapes on the seabed, corroded horses, warriors, the pale faces of marble statues looking up from 60 meters down, and the broken timbers of a huge, ancient ship. This was a Roman cargo vessel, a floating gallery of looted Greek art, probably headed for a villa in Italy. They started a salvage operation. They brought up bronze sculptures, marble masterpieces. It was dangerous work. One diver was paralyzed from the bends, another died, and during this recovery they also brought up something else, a lump of green, crusted bronze. About the size of a large book, it was fused to what looked like rotten wood. They catalogued it, boxed it up with the minor finds, sent it to the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. And there it sat for almost 2 years. To the archaeologists, it was a curiosity, maybe a ruined navigational instrument, maybe part of a statue. It was completely overshadowed by the graceful figures. They didn't know this corroded fragment, this ugly duckling, held a secret of gears and mathematics, celestial ambition encoded in metal. The world marveled at the art. But the true treasure, the clockwork computer, just waited in its storage drawer, waited for someone to see it. The green lump finally started whispering. Valerio Stais, a museum curator, was cleaning it. He saw something impossible, a tiny gear wheel in the bronze, then another and another. There were inscriptions too. Greek letters carved 2,000 years ago. Stais had a thought. This wasn't a statue, it was a machine, an astronomical clock. People dismissed it. The idea was charming but wrong. The timeline was known. Complex gears belonged to the Middle Ages. 1,000 years later, the Greeks were thinkers, artists. They didn't build mechanical computers, so the artifact was labeled an anomaly, a curiosity, maybe a medieval astrolabe that fell into the older wreck. A cataloging error was easier than rewriting history. The mechanism was set aside. It became a footnote, a fragment that didn't fit the story of human progress. For decades it sat in a drawer, a silent rebel. Discovery works like this. The truth isn't always hidden. Sometimes it's right there, waiting for our ideas to catch up. The real work, the cleaning, the first studies had just begun. It would take a new vision to see what was really there. For 50 years, the truth was trapped in that green bronze. The mechanism was completely sealed. Then the breakthrough happened. A new group of researchers arrived with tools that could see right through the corrosion. Gamma-ray and X-ray tomography, like medical scanners but for history, they let scientists look inside the fused mass without ever touching it, to map the faint shapes of gears that hadn't turned in 2,000 years. And what they found was astonishing. It was a tiny universe made of metal, more than 30 interlocking bronze gears, a precise, layered construction of wheels inside wheels. The scans showed something even more specific: differential gears. That's a crucial piece of engineering, a special gear arrangement that can add or subtract rotational speeds. It calculates a difference, and the history books were very clear. This technology, the differential gear, came from the 16th century. It belonged to the age of complex clocks and early instruments. But here it was, inside a box built before Christ was born. In this mechanism, the differential system modeled the moon's complex orbit to show its changing phases with perfect accuracy against the stars. It might have even calculated the positions of known planets. Every single gear was a miniature masterpiece. Each one was cut with tiny, triangular teeth. And these weren't random. The number of teeth on each gear was a deliberate choice, a mathematical signature. The ratios between them matched the great celestial cycles the Greeks had mapped. One gear train embodied the Metonic cycle. That's 19 years, after which the moon's phases repeat on the same dates. Another set of gears perfectly encoded the Saros cycle. An 18-year period that predicts when eclipses will happen again. This wasn't a static calendar for a wall. This was a dynamic, computational model. You turned a hand crank and the gears would spin, calculating future positions of celestial bodies. A mechanical simulation of the heavens. This internal structure changes everything. It proves the device was a purpose-built computer. Its only function was to translate abstract astronomical theory into the tangible, turning motion of bronze. And that translation forces a dramatic reevaluation. We have to ask who built it. The craftsmanship is too perfect, the design too elegant to be a one-time experiment. This level of precision suggests a workshop tradition, a school of master gear makers, of philosopher engineers whose other creations have just disappeared. Melted down, lost to time, or still lying undiscovered on the seafloor, the Antikythera mechanism isn't an anomaly anymore. It's a surviving whisper from a lost chapter of science. A chapter where the line between cosmic philosophy and intricate machinery was already being crossed. The silent clockwork universe inside that lump of bronze had finally started to speak. And what it said rewrote the story of human ingenuity. The front was this whole little moving cosmos, a bronze disk about the size of a dinner plate with all these engraved rings. At the center, a pointer for the date, the Egyptian calendar, but around that, the real thing, other hands driven by the clockwork inside. One traced the sun through the zodiac. Another was a sphere, half dark and half light, showing the moon's phase, and it wasn't just a picture. You could turn the crank on the side, watch time move forward across that metal sky. The pointers moving at different speeds, showing where the planets would be. A portable planetarium 2,000 years before the idea existed, but the real genius was the moon. The moon's orbit isn't a perfect circle. Its speed changes, a slight irregularity, the lunar anomaly. The Greeks knew this, Hipparchus described it, but this device didn't just know it. It modeled it physically. Inside, a special gear had a pin that moved in a slotted arm. That pin and slot made the moon's pointer speed up and slow down in its path, mimicking the real moon's subtle dance. This was mathematics turned into moving metal. It took complex astronomical tables, things only a scholar could read, and made them visible. Something anyone could see, turn the crank and the abstract became tangible. The prediction became something you could watch. This dial was more than a calculator. It was a statement, a philosophical demonstration that the universe ran on orderly, predictable principles. Principles so clear you could capture them in bronze and gears. It blended the latest science, advanced technology, and artistic design into one object. The front face didn't just show the cosmos, it made the cosmos obey the turn of a handle. The real function was on the back, two big spiral dials like snakes. The top one tracked the Metonic cycle, that 19-year rhythm where the moon and sun line back up. It was for the calendar. Let cities match their lunar month to the solar year, so festivals stayed in the right season. Then the lower spiral, the Saros cycle. 223 months, that was for eclipses. You'd turn the crank and a pointer would move along that groove, showing the exact month and day a shadow would fall. But the markings there said more than just the date. They said what kind of eclipse, solar or lunar. They even hinted at the color and which direction the shadow would come from. Back then, an eclipse wasn't just astronomy. It was a message, an omen about a king or a war. So this machine gave you an edge, not just the when, but the what. It turned a celestial shock into something you could see coming, something you could read. A priest could get ready, could check the signs, calm people down or warn them. Next to these cosmic timers was a smaller 4-year dial, the game's dial. It named the major festivals, the Olympics at Olympia, the Pythian Games at Delphi. That was the human rhythm next to the celestial one. It tied the predictable sky to the sacred patterns of society. A single official could look at this machine and know when to plant, when to hold a ceremony for the gods, and when to expect a troubling sky. So the back shows what it was for. Not a thinker's toy, a tool for governing and faith, a mix of the latest science and the oldest traditions. It served whoever needed to sync human events with the cosmos. From predicting an eclipse that could unsettle a kingdom to setting the date for the next Olympic peace, this bronze device was the central piece for a whole way of seeing the world. The machine had a voice. It was covered in text, thousands of tiny Greek letters carved on every surface, inside and out, a whole forest of words, its maker's handwriting. A user manual. The words are direct, technical. They label the dials, they name the pointers, they list the months, the signs of the zodiac, instructions for the person turning the crank. But then the text goes further. It describes the rising and setting of specific stars for different seasons. It explains the color of an eclipse, whether it will be dark or reddish. It notes the direction of the wind expected during that event, and that's where you see the purpose. This wasn't just calculating positions, it was interpreting omens. Blending hard astronomical cycles with the meaning those cycles held. The inscription turns it from a calculator into a counselor. A predicted eclipse wasn't just a shadow. It was a potential sign, change, fortune, challenge for a leader or a city. The style of the lettering gives us a date. Experts analyze the shapes of the characters, the way they're carved. That handwriting belongs to a specific period, about 100 to 150 years before the Common Era. That's a firm anchor. The ship sank around 70 BC, carrying loot from Greece to Rome. The mechanism was already an heirloom, a masterpiece from a generation or two before. So this is the peak of Hellenistic science, captured in bronze just before the Roman world absorbed it. The manual tells us who used it. The language is sophisticated but not overly esoteric. An educated user, a priest maybe, a temple official, a scholarly administrator in a royal court. Someone who needed to bridge two realms, the predictable, mechanical cosmos of gears and the meaningful, symbolic cosmos of tradition and divination. The inscriptions are the final piece. They let the makers speak across the millennia. They confirm this machine lived at an intersection between discovery and belief, where knowing the sky's schedule was the first step to understanding its message. The sun and moon were clear. But then there's the bigger question, the one that still splits opinion. Whether this machine showed the planets, the 5 wanderers, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, their motion is more complicated. They don't just go forward. They stop, they go backwards for a while in these loops before moving ahead again. That retrograde motion was a deep problem. Greek thinkers had ideas for it. The mathematician Apollonius came up with epicycles, circles on circles. Hipparchus worked on it. Ptolemy later built his whole system on that. But could they turn that geometry into metal? Into gears, the fragments we have show the sun and moon clearly. Evidence for planets is fainter. It's like ghosts in the machine, unexplained gears. Words in the inscriptions that seem to talk about planetary events. And then there's this big empty space on the front, right where the planets should be. Some reconstructions, like the one from the big research team, propose something incredible. They picture a system of nested tubes like precise mechanical pens, each holding a pointer for a planet. These tubes would go through the center, and behind the face a whole hidden gear train, using epicyclic gearing to actually produce those looping paths. To build that would be a staggering fusion, taking Babylonian math tables, combining them with Greek geometric models, and then inventing a new mechanical language to make it real. If that's true, then this device wasn't just a calendar. It was a complete model of the cosmos, a portable universe in bronze. You turn the handle and watch the dance of the gods play out in real time. That idea puts it in a category that feels out of time. It suggests a technical ambition we never gave that era credit for. So proving or disproving the planets isn't just about adding gears to a drawing. It's about finding the outer edge of ancient ingenuity. It makes you wonder if the machine's true scale, its original grandeur, is still partly hidden. Still lost in the gaps between those corroded pieces. The precision in those gears, those perfect cycles, didn't come from the workshop first. They came from somewhere else. From a civilization that watched the sky with a different obsession. For centuries, Babylonian astronomers sat in their temples and recorded everything. The rise of a planet, the exact start of an eclipse. They weren't looking for geometry or physical models. They were looking for patterns, numerical rhythms they could use to predict things. And they found them. They discovered that after 223 lunar months, a pattern of eclipses repeats. That's the Saros cycle. It's perfectly encoded in the machine's lower spiral. They also pinned down the 19-year Metonic cycle, which keeps lunar calendars in sync with the sun. This was a patient, monumental achievement, built on generations of data. Then Alexander the Great's empire stretched east, and this entire library of celestial knowledge written on clay tablets opened up to Greek thinkers. The Greeks took this raw Babylonian arithmetic, these long tables of numbers, and did something characteristically Greek with it. They asked why. They looked for the geometrical shapes, the perfect circles and epicycles that could physically explain those numbers. The Antikythera mechanism is the product of that fusion. It takes the Babylonian cycles, the empirical data, and uses Greek gears to turn them into a moving picture. You can see the blend in the words on the device itself. The inscriptions use Babylonian month names, not Greek ones. That isn't a minor detail, it's a signature. It tells us the machine's brain, its core data, was imported. So this isn't just a story of Greek invention. It's a story of ancient globalization, a Mesopotamian discovery interpreted by a Greek geometrical mind and then realized by a master artisan's hands. The corroded bronze we found isn't a purely Greek artifact. It's a hybrid, a testament to a connected world where knowledge flowed along trade routes and conquests. From the banks of the Euphrates to an island in the Aegean, it rewrites history not to credit one culture over another, but to show a truth we often forget. That the greatest leaps in understanding happen at the intersections, where different ways of seeing the world finally meet. The machine doesn't say who built it. There's no name, no signature, but it had to come from somewhere, a single mind or more likely a whole workshop. You think about the skills that had to come together. First, an astronomer, someone who could take Babylonian math and Greek geometry and turn it into numbers, into ratios. That's the blueprint. Then a bronze smith, someone who could cast plates that stayed perfectly flat. Then a gear cutter filing those tiny teeth by hand, on wheels sometimes less than 2 millimeters thick, and an engraver inscribing thousands of tiny Greek letters. This wasn't one person working alone. This was a high-tech workshop where abstract science met the very best craftsmanship, and that kind of operation needed funding. Serious funding, a royal patron maybe, a Hellenistic king interested in science in display. in a place like Rhodes or Alexandria, where the library had the data and the treasury supplied the bronze and the hands. We have hints of this in the texts. Cicero wrote about a bronze sphere made by Archimedes. It showed the motions of the sun and moon and planets. Posidonius is said to have made something similar. Cicero wasn't treating these as myths. They were real objects owned by wealthy Romans, so the Antikythera mechanism might not have been the only one. It might just be the one that survived, a single fragment pointing to a lost tradition, a tradition of clockwork philosophy, imagining that workshop changes things. It fills a blank in history. You can almost hear the activity, smell the hot metal and oil. Artisans turning cosmic theory into turning bronze. Their names are lost. But their legacy is still there, ticking forward inside that green lump from the sea. The Antikythera mechanism is out of place. It feels like a glitch. It shouldn't be there according to the timeline we usually follow. This level of engineering belongs 1,000 years later. Inside it is a differential gear. That's the same principle used in a car's axle today, letting one wheel turn faster than the other on a corner. In the mechanism, it did something similar. It subtracted one motion from another to model the moon's changing speed. That idea in bronze from before the Common Era, it's supposed to be impossible. The complexity is disorienting. More than 30 interlocking gears cut by hand, all working together. This isn't a simple timepiece, it's a system. A level of sophistication that Europe wouldn't match until the great cathedral clocks of the 14th and 15th centuries. Those came over 1,000 years later. It creates a disconnect. Our story is usually one of linear progress, a steady climb, but here is a peak, a towering achievement, and then a long, silent valley. 1,000 years where this knowledge seems to vanish. This artifact creates a kind of historical singularity, a point of such concentrated ingenuity that it warps the story around it. It forces a question: was this a fluke, a one-off masterpiece from a lone genius lost almost immediately, or is it something more challenging, the sole surviving piece from a broader tradition? A tradition of fine mechanics, of geared computers that flourished in the Hellenistic world and then was lost. Its existence suggests the seeds of the mechanical age were planted in antiquity. The intellectual soil was rich. The geometry, the metalwork, the desire to model the cosmos, it was all there, but the garden never fully grew. Maybe the world that nurtured it collapsed. The Hellenistic kingdoms, with their royal patrons funding science, gave way to Rome. Rome admired Greek culture, but its genius was for administration, for aqueducts and roads and concrete. The delicate philosophical clockwork of a device like this might have held less appeal. The specialized knowledge concentrated in a few workshops could have faded within a generation. The gears stopped turning, the designs were forgotten, the artisans found no new students, so the mechanism rewrites history, not by adding a footnote but by revealing a missing volume. An entire library of ingenuity we can only infer from one surviving book. It tells us our path wasn't a straight line. It was a landscape with forgotten peaks. And the silence that followed this one is as profound as the device itself. That silence, that gap of 1,000 years, is the real question. Why would something that advanced just disappear? If the Greeks could do it, why did we have to wait until the Middle Ages to see it again? The answer isn't one thing. It's a slow process, a grinding down, where a few different forces work together to erase a whole tradition. You have to look at the world that changed. The Hellenistic period was a golden age for this kind of work. Kingdoms like Ptolemaic Egypt, Pergamon, they had rulers who funded science and engineering as a point of pride. They paid for libraries and workshops. Then Rome rose. The Roman conquests brought stability, but they also changed the priorities. Roman engineering was about the monumental, the practical. Aqueducts, roads, siege engines, the delicate clockwork of something like the Antikythera mechanism. that might have seemed like an interesting toy, but not a vital technology for running an empire. So that royal patronage, the support for those specialized workshops, it likely dried up. The scholarly networks, the flow of ideas between places like Babylon and Rhodes and Alexandria, those got disrupted by new political borders. And there was a shift in thinking, too, about the cosmos itself. The Greek approach, the one in the mechanism, was deeply mechanical. It tried to model the heavens with moving parts. But later trends in philosophy and theology moved away from that. Some schools saw the universe as a living being, not a machine. Others focused just on pure mathematics or on spiritual contemplation. So the intellectual drive to build these physical models, it may have just faded. The knowledge wasn't thrown out, it was set aside, and then it was forgotten. Then you have the object itself. It was almost certainly not a common thing. Think of it as a bespoke masterpiece, a one-of-a-kind creation for a very elite client. A temple, a royal court, a wealthy scholar. It needed rare skills, expensive bronze, and countless hours of work. There were no factories, no production lines. The knowledge of how to build it was held in a few master artisans' hands, passed down maybe orally, or through a handful of precious diagrams on papyrus. That kind of knowledge is fragile, incredibly fragile. If the workshop closes, if the master dies without an apprentice, if that single sheet of papyrus is lost to damp or to fire, the entire technical blueprint is gone forever. And the material itself sealed the fate for most of these devices. Bronze was valuable, it was constantly recycled. In times of conflict, bronze was needed for weapons, for coinage. A delicate, complex astronomical computer sitting in a treasury or a library would be a prime candidate for the melting pot. Its gears would be recast as swords or coins in a matter of days. That's likely what happened to every other device like it. The Antikythera mechanism only survived because it was lost at sea, buried under sediment, hidden from the recycler's hands. Its existence is a miraculous accident, so this loss, it teaches a humbling lesson about progress. It isn't a straight line, an inevitable march forward. It's more like a fragile thread, a thread that can be easily broken. Advanced ideas can bloom in one era and then be completely forgotten, waiting to be rediscovered centuries later. The mechanism is a ghost from a road not taken, a glimpse of a different possible history of technology. It makes you ask what other threads have been broken. What other peaks of understanding are buried now, leaving no trace at all? The detective work on this device is its own story, a modern scientific saga. It happened in clean labs, not dusty archives. The real breakthrough wasn't a single genius with a magnifying glass. It was a series of machines that could see through time. In the 1970s, they took the first serious X-rays. They were blurry, ghostly, but they confirmed the gears were real. That was a revolution. But it was just the beginning. The next leap was three-dimensional X-ray tomography. That's the same technology hospitals use to see inside the body. Scientists used it on the corroded lumps of bronze, and suddenly they could slice through the fused mass. Digitally, layer by microscopic layer, they could map each gear tooth. The precise shape, the position, even the ones completely buried inside, they could see how the gear trains connected, or where a crucial piece had broken and fallen away. It was like performing an autopsy on a machine without ever touching a scalpel. Then came polynomial texture mapping, a photographic technique. It uses multiple light sources at different angles to highlight surface details you can't see with the naked eye. It's like shining a flashlight from every possible direction and combining all the shadows. This method brought the faint inscriptions back to life, the scratched letters worn smooth by 2 millennia of seawater and corrosion. They suddenly became legible. It was like finding the right light to read a faded manuscript. These tools are non-invasive. They don't risk damaging the fragile original. Instead, they let researchers build a perfect digital twin. A virtual model, they can rotate it, disassemble it, test it. They can simulate turning the crank, watch how the gears should have meshed. They can test different theoretical reconstructions. See which one makes the pointers move correctly across the dials. It's digital archaeology. The past is reassembled inside a computer. This work demands a special kind of team. It's not just archaeologists. The major international project leading this research brings together a unique blend of minds, historians of ancient science to interpret the inscriptions, the theoretical models, astronomers to understand the celestial cycles being calculated, mechanical engineers to analyze the gear trains, propose how they must have functioned, and imaging specialists to operate the advanced scanners. It's a multidisciplinary puzzle. The language of celestial mechanics has to be translated into the language of gear ratios. And then both have to be checked against the physical evidence, the fragments. There's a symmetry in this. To understand an ancient synthesis, Babylonian math, Greek geometry, master craftsmanship, we now use a modern synthesis. Physics, computer science, international collaboration. Our tools have changed, but the goal is the same: to decode a message from the past. Each new scan, each new algorithmic analysis of the surface, it promises another clue, a few more letters of the manual, a better understanding of a broken gear's purpose. It's a slow process, meticulous assembly. We're using the most advanced technology of our present to listen, finally, to the quiet ticking of a computer from the ancient world. And with every new detail we uncover, the picture comes a little more sharply into focus. The picture of that lost workshop and the brilliant, nameless minds that worked there. This artifact breaks a timeline we thought we knew. For centuries, the story was about medieval Europe, cathedral clocks, astronomical clocks. That was the start of complex machinery. But the Antikythera mechanism is from the 2nd century BCE. That pulls the story back over 1,000 years. It moves the invention of the mechanical computer from Leonardo da Vinci's time to the time of Archimedes. It's not an adjustment, it's a rewrite of the history of technology. It forces a confrontation with the idea of the scientific revolution. That period in early modern Europe is often seen as a unique leap, when humanity suddenly applied math to nature and built instruments to test theories. But here is a machine that did exactly that. It applied advanced mathematics, Babylonian cycles, Greek geometry to nature. And it built a complex instrument to show the results. So the question changes. It's no longer how the scientific revolution happened. It becomes why it took so long to happen again. The mechanism suggests it wasn't a beginning, but a rediscovery, a return to a path that had been opened and then lost. This challenges a view that places all sophistication in one time and place. It reveals a more global, more ancient kind of ingenuity, and it changes how we see ancient Greek science itself. We often picture it as pure thought. Philosophers in togas debating abstract forms, never getting their hands dirty with gears. The Antikythera mechanism proves that image is wrong. It shows a culture that not only conceived of celestial models but was driven to build them. To make the abstract tangible, this was science with an engineering soul, a hands-on tradition that took theoretical brilliance and gave it physical, turning form. It makes us reread the ancient texts differently. The legends start to sound less like fantasy. The myths of Daedalus, who built moving statues so lifelike they seemed alive. Stories of automated theaters and singing bronze birds in the courts of Hellenistic kings. For a long time, these were dismissed as imagination. But if a workshop could produce a geared computer that modeled the cosmos, is it so hard to believe other workshops could create simpler automata, wonders for entertainment or ritual? These stories might be the distorted echoes of a real tradition of fine mechanics, a tradition that has left almost no physical trace. The mechanism becomes a key. a single surviving key that unlocks a new interpretation of antiquity. It suggests a world where the line between philosopher and engineer was already blurry, where understanding the universe and building a model of it were two parts of the same pursuit. This reframes the entire period. It wasn't just an age of ideas waiting to be put into practice later. It was an age where practice was already happening. The drive to build models of reality, to externalize our understanding into working machines, seems to be a continuous human impulse. Not one invented in the Renaissance, but one that has flickered throughout history, sometimes burning bright, sometimes guttering low, but never fully extinguished. The silence that followed the Antikythera mechanism, then, isn't evidence that such things didn't exist. It's evidence of how fragile such knowledge can be. How easily a bright thread of understanding can be dropped, only to be picked up again centuries later by hands unaware they are following an ancient pattern. This changes the meaning of the artifact. It's no longer just a curious clock. It's a beacon from a lost continent of knowledge, a continent whose true outline we are only now beginning to map. Turning the crank wasn't just about making it work, it was something else. You were moving a handle, but you weren't just finding a date. You were starting up a little universe. You were showing something the Greek philosophers had talked about for ages, that the universe wasn't chaos. It was cosmos. That word meant order, and it meant beauty, a system that was harmonious. The planets moving in those perfect circles, that wasn't random. It was the physical form of a mathematical rule. Plato said the stars were a moving image of eternity. Aristotle said the heavens were the place of perfect, unchanging circular motion. But those were ideas. They were arguments you'd hear in a school. The Antikythera mechanism took those arguments and built them. It gave them gears, it gave them dials, it let you put your hands on the idea of cosmic order. You could watch the sun's hand go around the zodiac, one full circle in exactly a year. You could see the moon's marker wax and wane right on time. This was philosophy you could hold, a working model of reason itself, and you have to think about what that meant for the person using it. In a world where an eclipse might mean an angry god, where a comet was a terrifying sign, this machine told a different story. It said, look, these things aren't random. They're predictable. They follow a pattern so elegant we can build it here on this table. The shadow will come on this day from this direction. It will be this color. The machine didn't necessarily take the gods out of it. For a lot of people, it just showed you the gods' methods. It revealed the magnificent clockwork of a creator's plan. A plan so brilliant that human minds and hands could figure it out and build it. That changes the device. It's not just a calculator anymore. It becomes a teaching tool. A bridge between the abstract world of natural philosophy and the concrete world of technology, between wondering about the sky and showing how it works. It was a physical argument for a universe you could understand. For a user, maybe a student, maybe someone in a temple, turning that crank was a lesson. A lesson in cosmic citizenship. It taught that humans weren't just passive subjects under a chaotic sky. They were observers who could figure out its logic. That fits with a central Greek ideal, the pursuit of theoria, contemplative understanding. The mechanism put that contemplation outside of you. It made the hidden structure of reality something you could see. And by doing that, it answered a deep human want. The want to not just know a fact, but to see the principle behind it working, to witness the harmony. That philosophical side is what makes the thing feel timeless. Its technical gears are amazing, but the real genius is in what those gears were supposed to stand for. Not just cycles of time, but the very principle of order behind everything. It's a silent, bronze sermon about the rationality of the cosmos. A sermon that, even now, 2,000 years later, we're still hearing. That desire to find order in things, it wasn't just philosophical. It was practical. It was urgent. To understand why they'd build something so complex, you have to look at the sky the way they saw it. For them, astronomy and astrology weren't separate. They were two sides of the same coin. The stars and planets weren't just lights, they were forces. They were believed to influence everything: the fate of kings, the success of a harvest. A celestial event was a message, and reading that message correctly, that was about survival. It was about power, it was about divine favor. That's the world the Antikythera mechanism lived in. Its precision wasn't just for abstract science. It was for navigating a world where the cosmos spoke directly to human affairs. Take the eclipse predictions on its lower spiral dial. Today, we might see an eclipse as a beautiful event. 2,000 years ago, it was often a terrifying omen. The sun or moon being swallowed by shadow, that could signal the god's displeasure, an impending change in leadership, a coming conflict. For a ruler, not knowing an eclipse was coming could mean public panic. A loss of authority, a missed strategic opportunity. But if you did know, if you could predict not just the day but the hour, the direction of the shadow, even its likely color, that knowledge was immense power. A priest or royal advisor could prepare the proper rituals ahead of time to appease the gods. A leader could frame the event as a sign of their own divine connection, or as a warning to their enemies. The mechanism turned a potential crisis into a managed event. It gave its user a profound advantage. It turned celestial fear into a tool of statecraft. The other dials served equally vital functions. The Metonic cycle dial kept the lunar calendar in sync with the solar year. This wasn't about personal scheduling, it was about sacred time. Religious festivals had to be held in the correct season for the rituals to be effective. Agricultural cycles depended on knowing when to plant and harvest. The Pan-Hellenic Games, like the Olympics listed on its games dial, they weren't just athletic contests. They were sacred truces, times of peace dedicated to the gods. Getting these dates wrong wasn't a minor error. It risked offending the divine order itself. It could bring misfortune to the entire community. The mechanism acted as a master regulator for society's sacred rhythm, ensuring human activity stayed in harmony with the perceived will of the cosmos. So who would own such a device? It was undoubtedly a luxury object. The cost of the bronze, the countless hours of a master artisan's labor, the deep astronomical knowledge required to design it. This placed it far beyond ordinary people. It was an instrument for the elite, a wealthy individual, a major temple, a royal court. For them, it served multiple roles at once. It was a scientific instrument, yes, but it was also an astrological guide for important decisions, a definitive religious calendar for presiding over ceremonies. And perhaps most importantly, a stunning display of prestige and learning. Owning it said you possessed not just wealth, but access to the deepest secrets of the universe. It was a physical emblem of wisdom, a perceived connection to divine timing. This cultural embeddedness, that's the final piece. It explains why such an advanced object was created. Its complexity wasn't a mere intellectual exercise, not for a few philosophers in a library. It was a direct, sophisticated response to real-world demands. Political demands, spiritual demands, social demands. The mechanism didn't exist in spite of its world. It existed because of it. It served needs so vital they justified the immense effort of its creation. It was a bridge between the observable heavens and the urgent needs of the society below. A bridge built not of stone but of mathematics and metal and human ingenuity. We know it worked because people have tried to build it again, to make the gears turn. Reconstruction projects are where the theory meets physical reality. They're crucial experiments. The first major attempt was by Derek de Solla Price in the 1970s. His model, based on early X-rays, proved it was a complex calculator. It was a landmark, but it was simplified. It showed the concept. Then there was Michael Wright, a curator in London. he spent decades studying the fragments. He built a stunning brass replica, gear by gear. His model had a complete planetary system, showing the planets with their retrograde loops. It was a bold claim made tangible. You could turn the crank and see the ancient cosmos come to life. The planets moved in their strange dances. It was a physical argument for the mechanism's ambition. Today we have three-dimensional printed models, digital simulations. Teams like the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project create accurate virtual models. They can test 100 gear arrangements in a day, see which ones mesh, which ones produce the correct cycles on the dials. Each new reconstruction uses the latest scans, the newest readings of the inscriptions. And each one teaches us something. Sometimes a beautiful theory falls apart when you try to build it. The gears won't fit. The ratios are off, the pointer jams. That failure is a message from the past. It tells the modern builder, no, that's not how we did it, try again. Other times, a successful model reveals a subtlety. A clever solution to a mechanical problem, a way to pack more function into a tight space. That success is a different kind of message, a nod of respect across the centuries. This process is a dialogue, a conversation with the ancient makers. We ask a question by proposing a design. They answer through the constraints of bronze, of geometry, of the fragments themselves. The replicas make the genius accessible. You can hold a printed copy, feel the weight of the gears, turn the crank and watch the moon's phase shift. It stops being an abstract idea. It becomes a machine you can operate. This act of rebuilding is a profound form of respect. It takes the silent, corroded artifact and gives it back its voice. Not just the voice of its inscriptions, but the voice of its function, the soft click of gear teeth engaging, the smooth sweep of a pointer across a dial. These sounds, these motions, were last experienced 2,000 years ago. By rebuilding it, we complete a circuit. We close a loop in time. We prove that their vision wasn't just theoretical. It was practical, mechanical, and elegant. The replicas are more than demonstrations. They are time machines. They let us hold a piece of rewritten history. And with a slow turn of a handle, see the past's own vision of the future unfold. The legacy of this device isn't a straight line. The specific gears, the exact design, those were lost. But the deeper idea, the ambition to model the cosmos with a machine that may never have fully gone away, you see echoes later on, faint but they're there. Centuries later, in the medieval Islamic world, astronomers had the astrolabe, a sophisticated instrument for mapping stars. They built geared calendars, complex water clocks. Byzantine texts describe these elaborate automata in palace throne rooms, mechanical birds that sang, lions that roared. Those weren't computers, but they came from that same tradition of fine mechanics, that desire to mimic nature with moving parts. No direct link is proven, but it's possible a diffuse memory, a whispered tradition of such wonders, indirectly reached the great European clockmakers of the Middle Ages. Those cathedral clocks with their rotating spheres and moving figures charting the heavens, that might have been a rediscovery, not an invention. The thread was thin, but maybe it was never completely broken. More than that, the mechanism's legacy is one of inspiration. It stands as a permanent monument to human curiosity. For a modern scientist or engineer, it's a humbling and exhilarating reminder. It tells them the drive to build models of reality is ancient. That quest to externalize our understanding of the universe into a working physical form, that's a timeless human impulse. Today we build planetarium projectors that cast stars onto domes. We create supercomputer simulations modeling the birth of galaxies or the intricacies of climate. Those are the spiritual descendants of this device. They are all tools for the same purpose, to take the vast, abstract cosmos and make it something we can see and manipulate and comprehend. The device reshapes our historical understanding in a fundamental way. It shatters that condescending view of ancient peoples as primitive thinkers. They weren't. They were capable of leaps of innovation and synthesis that rival our own. They just expressed it in a different technological language, and that realization is its greatest gift. It connects our technological present with a sophisticated ancient past, not as a story of simple origins, but as one of recurring brilliance. The mechanism whispers across the millennia that the capacity for genius isn't a product of any one era. It's a constant potential within humanity, waiting for the right confluence of knowledge and need and craftsmanship to spring into being, whether in bronze 2,000 years ago or in silicon today. The question stays with you: if this is the only one we have, where are the others? A machine this advanced, this finely made, it feels like it should have company. It feels like a survivor, and that feeling drives the search now, this ongoing hunt for a second Antikythera mechanism. The original was found in a shipwreck, a Roman ship carrying looted Greek art. That tells us something. This was a valuable object worth shipping across the sea, probably a commissioned piece, a gift for a wealthy Roman who appreciated Greek science, Greek luxury. If one was shipped, others might have been. The Mediterranean is a graveyard for ancient commerce. Countless ships went down, their cargo just sitting there on the seabed. So the possibility is there that another mechanism, maybe a more complete one, is buried under sand and silt. That's the lure for underwater archaeologists. They're scanning the seafloor now with new tools, side-scan sonar painting a picture of the bottom, advanced metal detectors that can pick out bronze, remotely operated vehicles with delicate arms. They're looking for the right wreck from the right period along the right trade routes. A find like that would change everything. A second device wouldn't just be a duplicate, it would be a conversation. By comparing the two, researchers could see design variations. They could confirm or challenge the reconstructions of the planetary displays. They could study different workshop styles, maybe even identify a school of makers. It would turn a solitary marvel into evidence of a tradition. But the search isn't just in the deep sea. It's also in museum basements all over the world. For a century after its discovery, the Antikythera mechanism itself was mislabeled, set aside as a curious lump. How many other storage drawers hold similar fragments, dismissed as corroded statue bits or just scrap? Scholars are now re-examining old collections, knowing what to look for. They search for traces of gear teeth, for that specific green patina of ancient bronze, for any hint of internal structure. A promising fragment might be scanned like the original was, to see if gears are hidden inside. This archival work is slow, painstaking, but the potential reward is huge. Then there are the texts. Ancient writers like Cicero described celestial spheres, moving models of the heavens. These weren't described as myths, but as real objects owned by wealthy Romans. For a long time, historians read those accounts as exaggerations, as metaphors. Now, with the physical proof of the mechanism in hand, those texts read differently. They sound like eyewitness reports. They suggest these devices were known, at least among the elite. They reinforce the idea that what we found wasn't unique in its time, only in its survival. This ongoing search across oceans and archives, it keeps the story alive. It reminds you that history isn't a static set of facts in a book. It's an active process, an unfolding discovery. Every time a new shipwreck is found, or a forgotten artifact is pulled from a crate and placed under a scanner, there's a chance. A chance to find another piece of the puzzle, a chance to hear another voice from that lost workshop. The Antikythera mechanism rewrote history once from the depths. The hope is that somewhere in the dark water or a dusty drawer, its sibling is waiting to do it again. That corroded lump isn't just in a museum case anymore. The Antikythera mechanism, it's become a modern icon. You see it in science documentaries, the gears turning in those animations. It's in novels, a plot device from a lost civilization. It's in video games, this piece of ancient tech that gives the player special knowledge. In these stories, it's a symbol of a forgotten golden age. A whisper that our ancestors were more capable than we think. This fascination moved it from academic journals into a kind of cultural language. It's a reference point now. For a certain wonder, the wonder about lost knowledge, hidden histories, and about these so-called out-of-place artifacts. That idea where objects seem too advanced for their time, hinting at impossible things. The mechanism gets pulled into those discussions, but scholars make a crucial distinction. The mechanism isn't an out-of-place artifact. It's not proof of aliens or Atlantis. It's proof, instead, of the actual advanced capabilities of the Hellenistic world. It fits. It uses known Greek geometry, Babylonian math, the materials and craftsmanship of its era. Its genius is in the synthesis, not in impossible physics. The popular stories, though, they lean into the mystery. They emphasize the gap, the silence after it. And that speaks to a public longing, a desire to challenge the simple story of human progress, the story that says we started primitive and got steadily smarter. The mechanism disrupts that. It shows a peak of sophistication, then a valley of forgetting. That pattern feels true. It resonates, this sense that brilliance is fragile. That great things can be built and then lost. That's why replicas are in science museums now, from London to Tokyo. They're centerpieces, held up as the first analog computer. A foundational piece in the history of engineering. When you stand before one, you're not just looking at ancient Greece. You're looking at the origin of the idea of a programmable machine. The mechanism's own journey from a crust of bronze to a global icon, that's a story too. It shows how one object can bridge worlds. It connects scholarship with public imagination. It ties the work of archaeologists and engineers to our own questions. Questions about where we come from, about the limits of ingenuity, and about what other surprises might be waiting. Buried in the earth, resting on the seafloor, ready to rewrite the story again. This object makes you reconsider the word computer. We picture screens, keyboards, silicon, but a computer is something more basic. It's a device that takes an input, follows instructions, and gives an output. And by that definition, the Antikythera mechanism is a computer. Its input was a date. You set it by turning a hand crank. Its program was the fixed logic of its gear trains, the ratios of teeth. Those ratios embodied the Metonic cycle, the Saros cycle. And its output was the movement of pointers across dials, showing the future state of the heavens. It computed eclipses. It computed the moon's phase. It computed the dates of sacred games, and it did all this through an intricate ballet of bronze. No code, no electricity. It was an analog computer. Using continuous physical quantities, the rotation of gears, to model continuous natural phenomena. That recognition changes things. It reshuffles the whole family tree of computation. For a long time, the story started with Charles Babbage's difference engine in the 19th century, a mechanical calculator, visionary but largely unbuilt. Or maybe with the room-sized electronic machines of the mid-20th century. The Antikythera mechanism pushes that origin story back by 2,000 years. It establishes a lineage, a broken one, but a direct line from these ancient gears to the silicon in our pockets. It proves the desire to automate calculation, to offload intellectual labor onto a machine, isn't a modern impulse. It's not born of the industrial age. It's a timeless urge, one that flourished in the ancient Mediterranean, was lost, and had to be painfully rediscovered. That redefinition might be the mechanism's most profound rewrite. It places the birth of computational thinking not in the age of steam, but in the age of bronze. It gives the grand narrative of information technology a new starting point, a dramatic one. It begins not with vacuum tubes, but with a craftsman's hand. Filing perfect teeth into a wheel of metal, encoding the rhythms of the cosmos into a machine that could think. Bronze was their silicon, not just any bronze. The fragments show a specific alloy high in tin. That choice was deliberate. It's copper and tin mixed to a particular blend, strong enough to hold its shape under tension, but soft enough to work with hand tools. You could cast it into plates, then file it down, cut it with incredible precision. Every gear began as molten metal poured into a mold, then it became a surface for a master's file. The teeth are tiny, they're triangular, each one cut by hand. Looking at a modern scan, you feel a kind of awe. The consistency, the spacing, it speaks to a rhythm. A craftsperson's muscle memory developed over years. This wasn't mass production. It was bespoke engineering. Each component was fitted, adjusted, until it meshed perfectly with the one next to it. The gears had to be flawless because the cosmos they modeled was considered flawless. Then there are the words, the scales and inscriptions covering the surfaces. They weren't stamped, they were engraved. With a fine metal stylus, a scribe scratched thousands of tiny Greek letters into the bronze. The lettering is often less than 2 millimeters high. Doing that required more than steady hands. It required exceptional eyesight, probably a young person, working under the best natural light available. It was an act of documentation and artistry. Each label for a zodiac sign, each line of the user manual permanently committed to the metal. A single slip could mar the entire panel. That vulnerability makes the surviving text even more remarkable. It's the direct handwriting of the maker, frozen in time. We can piece together its original form. The gears were mounted in a wooden frame. The wood rotted away in the seawater long ago, but traces of the grain pressed into the corroded bronze tell us it was there. The whole assembly was protected by bronze plates, front and back, each engraved with its own celestial dials. Put together, it would have been about the size of a large shoebox. Substantial, with a satisfying heft but still portable. You could carry this universe in your arms, set it on a table in a library or a temple, and then begin to turn the crank. That physicality is crucial. It wasn't an abstract diagram on papyrus. It was an object. You interacted with it. You felt the resistance of the gears. Heard the soft click as the teeth engaged. Watched the pointers glide. It made the mathematics experiential. Understanding these materials and methods does something. It bridges the gap between the grand idea and the human effort. It pulls us back from the cosmic scale to the workshop floor. You can almost see the scene. The forge fire glowing, the smell of hot metal and oil, the sound of a file scraping bronze over and over, the intense focus of the engraver leaning close. This device represents countless hours of skilled labor, a chain of expertise from the miner who extracted the ore to the astronomer who provided the ratios to the artisan who cut the final tooth. It was a collaborative masterpiece, and the names of every person involved are lost to us. That might be the most humbling realization. This rewrite of history, this evidence of ancient technology, was built by hands we will never know. They turned celestial theory into a tangible, turning reality, and in doing so they left a message, not in words but in craftsmanship, a message that says, look what we could do. A message that waited 2,000 years under the sea for us to finally understand. You feel the weight first. The machine is solid, bronze, cool to the touch, set in a wooden case. Your hand finds the crank, a simple metal rod on the side. You turn it, not with force, a steady, deliberate pressure, and the universe starts to move. A soft clicking fills the room, rhythmic. That's the sound of 30 bronze gears, their triangular teeth finding purchase, one after another. It's the sound of mathematics in motion. On the front, the pointers begin their journey. The golden sun marker advances along its ring, passing through the engraved symbols of the zodiac. The moon's pointer follows. A delicate black and white sphere. Its path is more complex, its speed changes subtly. There's a special gear inside, a pin and slot gear doing its work. You're not reading a prediction, you're watching it unfold in real time under your own hand. You can stop the crank at any date, look at the positions. See the moon's exact phase, then turn again. The experience is interactive. You could spin the crank forward a year. See the celestial backdrop for the next Pythian games at Delphi. Or turn it backward, slowly. Listen to the gears reverse their dance. Find the eclipse that darkened the sky on the day of a famous, long-ago battle. This was time travel made possible by gears, by Greek geometry. On the back, your actions have consequences. In 2 spirals, the pointer on the large Saros dial creeps along its coiled track. Every full turn of the crank is a single month. The pointer moves 1 notch closer to the next predicted eclipse. Tiny Greek letters are next to each slot. They tell you what to expect, not just the date, the hour, the direction of the shadow, even the likely color, the color of the dimmed sun or moon. You're not just calculating an event. You're tracing its approach along a physical path. This tactile feedback changed everything. Scrolls and clay tablets gave you data. Static diagrams gave you a snapshot. But this machine gave you a relationship with time itself. You developed a muscle memory for the cosmos. You felt the 19-year Metonic cycle. In the resistance of the gears, you saw the 18-year Saros rhythm. As a literal, winding road on bronze, the abstract became intimate. For a priest, this was more than a tool. It was a ritual object, the act of turning the crank, setting the heavens in motion to divine a future omen. That was a ceremony. It bridged a gap, the gap between human agency and cosmic will. For a scholar, it was a revolutionary teaching device. It demonstrated principles, epicycles, anomalies, not through dense argument, through visible, mechanical cause and effect. You could see why the moon slowed down. The machine showed you. This hands-on exploration created an understanding, a visceral understanding. Scrolls alone could never impart it. It made the user an operator of a miniature universe. This transforms how we see the mechanism today. It's not a cold, dead calculator. It was an experience. A dynamic, engaging conversation between a human mind and a model of reality. To operate it was to feel, for a moment, that you held the logic of the cosmos in your hands. And with every gentle click of those bronze gears, that logic became just a little more clear. That intimate, hands-on experience, it was the product of a specific time and place. And it makes us look again at a story we tell, the Greek miracle, that idea of a sudden, brilliant dawn in classical Athens, a perfect storm of philosophy and art and democracy. That's where Western thought was born. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, their work on logic, ethics, it feels like the pure heart of Greek achievement. But the Antikythera mechanism isn't from that world. It wasn't built in 5th century Athens. It comes from a different era, the Hellenistic period after Alexander the Great. It's a later chapter, often seen as a long decline from the classical peak. A time of sprawling kingdoms, not democratic city-states. And yet, that's when the mechanism was made. Its existence shifts the spotlight away from the philosophical debates of the Athenian agora to the royal research institutes of Alexandria, the port of Rhodes, the great library of Pergamon. These were centers of a new kind of enterprise, funded by Hellenistic kings. Kings who saw knowledge as a tool of power, as prestige. They housed vast libraries, collecting not just Greek texts but Egyptian and Babylonian knowledge. They employed scholars with a practical bent, astronomers making meticulous observations, engineers building sophisticated devices. This was a culture of state-funded research, of cross-cultural synthesis. The Antikythera mechanism is a direct product of that. It takes Greek theoretical geometry, fuses it with the precise numerical data of the Babylonians. and then realizes it through advanced craftsmanship. This wasn't a one-time miracle in one city. It was the result of a sustained, collaborative process. Across an interconnected world, the so-called miracle wasn't a single flash of lightning. It was a longer, evolving current of innovation, flowing from the classical foundation into new, practical directions. To understand the mechanism, you have to give the Hellenistic era its due. It was a period of profound technological synthesis, a time when the love of wisdom philosophy actively sought out the tools of the workshop. Where the abstract forms Plato contemplated might find their expression in the precise turning of a bronze gear on a lathe, this rewrites the story. From a tale of pure thought to one of thought made manifest, it asks us to expand our view of Greek science, to include not just the mind that conceived a celestial model, but the hands that built it. The true miracle might not have been the birth of an idea, but its enduring, tangible life in the world. The green bronze still keeps its secrets after all these years. We have fragments, pieces of a puzzle, and a crucial question. Is this the whole machine, or was it part of something bigger? The main piece fits in a box, but it could have been in a grander casing. Maybe it was a centerpiece connected to other devices, a public clock perhaps. The evidence is silent, so you have elegant minimalism. And you have elaborate possibility. Then there's the planets. The evidence is compelling, but it's circumstantial. The empty space on the dial, the words in the inscriptions, the unexplained gears in the scans. Did pointers for Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn once move across that face, tracing their paths, or was the genius just for the sun and moon? The planets just noted in the text. The difference is profound. A machine showing the planets is a model of the known cosmos. Without them, it's still an astonishing computer. But the ambition is more limited. Resolving this isn't about adding gears to a diagram. It's about defining the ancient maker's ultimate goal. We're still searching for the physical proof. The thing that settles the debate and the words we've lost. The inscriptions are fragments. Entire panels are missing, worn smooth by the sea or broken away. These lost passages could be the key. They might have the maker's name, the date, instructions for functions we haven't guessed. They could explain every mysterious gear. Each missing word is a sentence from a manual we may never read. The future of this is new tools. Imagine imaging so advanced it can detect the ghost of ink long after the surface has eroded. Artificial intelligence trained to see patterns in the corrosion, suggesting the arrangement of lost gear trains, completing broken letters. These aren't distant dreams. They're the next steps, a technological dialogue with the past. Meanwhile, the sea may still hold answers. The Antikythera wreck site hasn't given up everything. Continued underwater archaeology, sensitive metal detectors, careful excavation could reveal another fragment, a single new gear, a plate with intact text. Could transform our understanding overnight. Even the metal has a story. Scientists can do a lead isotope analysis on the bronze. It's a geological fingerprint. The signature of the lead in the alloy can be matched to ancient mines across the Mediterranean. If a match is found, it points to a region, an island, a city where the ore was smelted. This wouldn't just tell us about trade routes. It could locate the workshop, the cradle of the invention. Every one of these questions is an open door. An invitation. It calls to the next generation, historians, engineers, archaeologists. They'll arrive with tools we haven't invented, asking questions we haven't thought to ask. The story of the Antikythera mechanism isn't a closed book. It's a living, evolving conversation, a testament to a truth that our understanding of history is never complete. It's always being rewritten, one discovery, one scan, one insight at a time. This key is bronze and it's corroded. It fits a lock on a door we thought was sealed. Behind that door is a forgotten chapter of human ambition, but it's not a chapter about simple beginnings. It's about a startling technological sophistication. The Antikythera mechanism, it proves the ancient world wasn't just a prelude to our own. It was a parallel achievement, a place where the drive to understand the cosmos turned into a drive to build its mirror. In gears, in bronze, this device with its precise predictions, its philosophical depth, it forces a rewrite, a dramatic rewrite, and it's an exciting one because it adds a layer of complexity, a layer of genius to a story we thought we knew. It shows the history of science isn't a straight line upward from primitive to advanced. It's a landscape with forgotten peaks and silent valleys. It's a story of knowledge that can be brilliantly found, then tragically lost, and then miraculously found again, centuries later. That might be its most profound lesson. Our ancestors weren't simpler versions of us, just waiting to invent what we have. They were capable of leaps of synthesis, leaps of craftsmanship that still command our awe. Their genius echoes not in vague myths but in the tangible, intricate logic of a machine. So this artifact, it's a reminder to look at all of history with fresh eyes. Questioning eyes to challenge the established narratives we've been handed. Because if something this advanced could vanish from the record for 1,000 years, what else might have vanished? What other marvels of understanding, what other tools of thought, hidden in the earth or resting on the seafloor, waiting for their moment of rediscovery? The search itself becomes part of the legacy, a call to keep looking, to keep wondering.